This is AM Agenda. With me now, Labor's Peter Khalil and the Liberal Party's James Paterson. Senator Paterson, first to you on the same-sex marriage vote. What do you make of the news poll? Is that a concern for those campaigning for change in this regard?
Well, I heard your interview earlier with David Crowe from the Australian, Kieran, and I basically agree with David's consensus there, which is that the yes vote is not as strong as it might have once been. There has been certainly an effect of the campaign, but there's still a long way ahead. And if you were from the no campaign's point of view, you might be encouraged by the direction of the change, but there's still a long way to go if they're going to catch up to the yes vote by the time of the end of the survey.
Yeah. And as David also pointed out, Peter, in relation to the number of those that have voted, the number is 15% in this survey, but as he said and suggested, it would likely lag the real number, which my sense would be, I mean, not empirical data backed, but just my sense of things is that a lot more people would have voted than that.
Yeah, that's probably right. I mean, look, we're going to have some of these surveys on the survey and the polling on the survey over the next 6 weeks until the end of this process, and we're going to see swings and roundabouts, ups and downs. My real concern is the abrogation almost of our role and responsibility as representatives in a representative democracy, and the precedent that this survey sets for us as parliamentarians. I mean, are we to go and run off and have a survey on each and every law that we're about to pass through Parliament? No, we're not. And this sets a really bad precedent. I think that's one problem. The second problem is obviously some of the hateful and divisive actions and activities that people have undertaken in the campaigning on both sides, really. So this is something that I don't think is good for the body politic.
What's your view on the bank's move? Let's turn to a couple of other issues before we wrap up. Peter, on the bank's move to cut the ATM fees, one did it, they all did it.
Yeah, well, very, very welcome news, I think, for people out there. And look, the $2, when you go to an ATM that's not with your bank and you're paying this $2, it was not reflective of the actual price of this. And I think it was the Commonwealth Bank that made the first move. It was the right thing to do. They were looking for a good news story, maybe, given some of the travails of the last couple of months. But the other banks followed suit, and that's welcome news for punters. And Labor has been constantly on about transparency and accountability on the banks, and it's good to see that some of this is paying off for punters, but we're not going to stop our calls for a Royal Commission. There needs to be more looked at with the way that the banks have been conducting their actions and activities over the past decade.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's a small step towards some PR effort by the bank. Certainly CBA led the charge on this front, Senator Paterson, but they've got a fair way to go in terms of redeeming themselves entirely within the eyes of the electorate, I would have thought.
That's probably right, Kieran, but I think the most positive thing about this is it didn't require any initiative at all on my part or Peter's part, on the part of any other parliamentarian. This was the banks acting at their own initiative in response to consumer demand, and there was no law passed, there was no mandate issued. They went and did it on their own, and I think that's a positive thing, and the more we see of that, the better.
Well, the Senator underestimates our small little bit of influence and power we have as members of Parliament. Labor has been constantly campaigning about transparency for the banks, and I think this has started to rub off. So I wouldn't underestimate your abilities there, James,
I'm sure, Peter,
maybe in the Senate.
Your powerful Sky appearances and those media releases that caused these massive institutions.
Well, no, our front bench and our leadership has been very strong on accountability with the banks.
And Senator Paterson, finally, let's wrap up, if we can, on some of that energy debate I had with Bill Shorten a bit earlier, discussion on the targets and so on. Suggestion today that you'd need a 66% renewable energy target to meet Paris. He rejected that, said that that's not on their, not part of their game plan. But clearly, the government is the one where the spotlight is right now in terms of trying to come up with some sort of compromise on a clean energy target. Is that doable?
Well, just quickly, Kieran, the thing I found most interesting about your interview with Bill Shorten is that you had to ask him 3 times to confirm that he still had a policy of 45% emissions reduction. And even after asking it 3 times, he still wouldn't utter those words 45%. He was deliberately vague, I thought, in answering your question. So, I mean, I'm none the wiser. Does Labor seriously propose to reduce our emissions by 45%? And if so, how on earth do they propose to do that without it coming at a massive cost to Australian consumers? Already, the emissions reductions targets which we have, which we think are responsible, of 26 to 28%, have caused some cost increases. What about 45%?
Peter Khalil, your thoughts finally? Just 30 seconds left, Peter.
Yeah, we've got a policy that's pretty clear, as Bill told you this morning, Kieran. We've got a commitment, and let's just talk about the reality here. Pull the gas on trigger, start releasing that. Actually have a clean energy target to give the market direction to actually start investing in renewables. James is all about smaller government, and yet all this government wants to do is buy coal plants that are 50 years old, and the technology is 50 years old. It's absolutely a schmozzle on the part of this government, their energy policy. We have a clear policy. We know what we want, and we'll do it if we win government.
Peter and James, we're out of time. Appreciate it, Senator Paterson. Peter, Khalil, a quick break. Back in just a moment.